guys, welcome to the last tutorial of our series on mocap refinement. This time I'm capturing a motion that has a side-facing element, which is the hook punch you see in my capture. Further in, you're going to learn a few other techniques as well. You can notice in my capture that I'm sort of facing the side, and directing my punches to that side so the Kinect sensor can recognize them. Okay, naturally I'm going to go through that same procedure of cutting out the particular capture that I want, and deleting the other parts of the clip that I don't need, just like in the previous tutorials. Again, I want to start from a relatively relaxed pose, so I can ensure that the rest of the motion has an ideal base pose. Once I have the section that I need, I'll go to the first frame and adjust my character's pose before his motion begins, which will again affect the remainder of the clip. Again, here I'm just doing that same pose adjustment that I did in the previous tutorials. Whether you want your motion clip to start from this pose, or a pose further on is up to you, but it's always good to change the initial pose to give better results to the rest of the motions. With this adjustment, there's a little twist though. I'm going to turn my head sideways to start my motion, since I'm going to change it to an almost side-facing motion later. When I scrub through the timeline, you'll see the type of motion that I want, facing the angle of the camera. Okay, now on to Direct Puppet. Now, previously I used both the primary and screen-based rotations to puppet my character's chest, but as you can see, this particular motion includes a hook punch, which requires the chest to rotate significantly in order to follow the punch. Therefore, I'm going to use the screen-based rotation. In addition, if I'm using screen-based rotation, the angle that you're viewing your character from also has a big effect on the resulting movement. Here I'm going from the front, and to make the chest move with the hook, I need to move the mouse quickly to the right. Once I'm done that, I'll move on to the head and this time use primary rotation for slight movement, because I generally want the head to be facing the same direction. Once I'm done recording that, I'm going to move on to the next step. Okay, it looks as though the skipping motion at the beginning of my action actually looks not bad, so I won't really need to make any adjustments here. Let's close the fist slightly at the beginning of the clip, but not too tightly yet. Just click and drag on the palm indicators to do this. Okay, the first motion key edit I want to make will be right here before my first punch. So what I'm going to do to save the position data up until that point is to add in a keyframe. That will make my next keyframe edit transition start from that point. Now I'm going to go right before he launches the first jab and close his fist more into a punching fist using the same technique as before. I'm then going to skip ahead to the part where his arm is fully extended for the jab and rotate it a bit to the side. You can see how this rotation also affects the second small jab as well, and both of those punches look okay, along with the body position of my character. So now for the big hook. Basically what I'm going to do is have 3 separate keyframes, one at the beginning of the hook, one at the end, and another in the middle, to ensure a nice even look for the punch. So where my punch is at its furthest extent, I'm going to close the fist completely to create a keyframe there. Then what I'll do is go to the approximate middle of my punch, and reposition the arm slightly to make a nice even speed for the punch. With some rotation and movement of both upper and lower arms, I can get a pose like this. Now the ending pose of my punch is a bit more difficult. There are a few things wrong here, the main one being that I now need to manually rotate my torso, as well as move the hook further along to seem more powerful. This time I'm going to use a combination of both arm and torso movement and rotation to get an ideal result. You can see that even though I used direct puppet to get the rough movement for the chest, it could still use a little extra refinement. It's important to note that I'm also adjusting the hip direction here as well. Because it's a side-facing motion, the hips, midsection, and rotation of the legs need to be adjusted at the extent of the punch in order to complete the modification for a side-facing motion. Basically what I'm trying to achieve here is the pose that my character would have at the very extent of his hook. Also, you can notice that my character's center of gravity is a little low. I can adjust that from the side here by simply lifting up the waist, which will in turn adjust the rest of the body's height via human IK. You'll see that after I complete all these motion key edits at that frame, that my recoil motion is pretty messed up. Again, this can easily be fixed, just like in the second tutorial, by using the reset button in the motion layer editor. Now the basic motion layer editing is complete, so we can move on to further refinements. If you're dealing with a motion that requires different levels of refinements, it's a good idea to save different project files of your various steps along the way, so you can go back and make adjustments at certain stages. Now you'll see that near the end of the motion there is some minor wrist flipping, which will sometimes happen when the Kinect sensor loses track of your hands. In order to adjust this, I'm going to use the break command on the clip, right before my first wrist flip begins on my character's left hand. Now it's important to have your timeline on that first frame after the break, because this is the pose the wrist will stay at when I right click and remove the animation from the left hand. Now you can see as I scrub through that the hand will no longer have that strange wrist flip. I'll just repeat the same thing for the right hand flip as well. Keep in mind that if I right click and remove the animation at a different frame, that whole clip will maintain that position at that frame, yet remove the animation, so be aware. Okay, what I'm doing here is just slightly adjusting my final pose to face slightly more to the side. After I'm done that, I'm going to go right near the end of the clip and use the motion layer editor to put my character in his final pose. I need to position the arms correctly for a sort of boxing pose, and I can curl the fingers slightly individually as well to get the best result. The next edit I'm going to make is to add a little natural idle movement at the end of my motion to the upper torso. To do this, I've selected primary rotation with my chest, and you can see when I record that I get a natural looking sort of boxing stance by slowly moving my mouse around in circles. Once that's finished, I want to save my motion as a single clip from that point. I also suggest if you're doing further edits that you save a separate project file as well. Okay, so you know how to loop already, but what about a reverse loop? If I go to the end of my first clip and apply the motion to my character once again, you'll see the normal transition back to the beginning pose once again. If I right click and select reverse on that clip, I get a sort of reverse punching combo, but you can notice that right away my character's position will change. This is basically because he's sliding back to the root of the second clip, which is different from where the first one ended up. Don't worry though, it's easy to fix. First I want to make sure that I click and drag to get rid of my transition area first. Then what I want to do is click on the first frame of the second clip and select Align to Root. You'll notice my character move right away to the proper location. Note that if you align the whole clip to the root in this situation, you will get the wrong result. Aligning to root on this one frame works because it's only aligning to that one frame. It's essentially changing the initial position of the character and that's it. You can see the results in the playback. Maybe not the best suited technique for this motion, but at least now you know how to do it for other motions as well. Okay, so here's a run through of the final motion. very last thing I want to do is fool around with the time warp feature in the timeline to add in a little slow motion emphasis to my hook punch. To do this, I'll need to have an unbroken clip, so make sure you save and reapply the previous motion. First, I'll break the clip at the beginning of my hook, and then at the very extent of it as well. What I want to do next is right-click on that little clip and select the Ease In feature for the time warp. What this will do is create a sort of slowing down at the beginning of that clip, and eventually get to regular speed. You can see a small result here, but we'll add some more emphasis later. For now, I'm just going to move on to the frame after the punch is completed, and break the clip there as well. However, this time when I use the time warp, I'm going to select Ease Out to slow down the motion as it exits that clip. Alternately here, I can take the whole punching motion itself and use the Ease In and Out motion on a single clip. You'll see a slight effect, but I want to make this a bit more exaggerated. To do that, I'll go to a frame where I want to extend the slow motion effect and click in the project track and then select Add Frames. What this will do is just put more frames after that particular frame, and you can see that my clip now has some blank space after it, in which nothing happens. What I can do is simply click and drag to stretch that clip longer now, and when I play back, you'll see a much more pronounced effect. So, here's the playback. I'll do the same for the Ease Out section as well. Now, if I want to customize the rate of my slow motion even further, I can do that by again right-clicking on my clips and selecting Custom. Here, I can increase the severity of my curve. Once this is completed, you can see my final motion. Don't forget that you can change the speed and location of all these time warp edits by breaking clips in different places, and using different custom settings as well. So this is a good example of how you can use iClone's powerful animation tools and take any mocap motion and customize it in any way you want. You can potentially save a lot of money on buying motions, so what are you waiting for? Go out and try it for yourself.